This is what it feels like.
Good morning, England. Today, we will be discussing a number of topics, but most importantly, we have a special guest. Today, we will be interviewing great British author, poet, and scholar William Golding about his new book, Lord of the Flies. William Golding recently came out with a new book called Lord of the Flies. This book was published by Faber and Faber Company, based in London, England. So, William, tell me a little about yourself, like when you were born and where you were born and just a little bit about your life. Okay, so my name is William Golding and I was born in 1911 in Cornwall, England. I was actually born in my grandmother's house and I spent most of my childhoods there as well, while my dad was a science teacher, a science professor in a university in England. In 1940, I joined the Naval Army to fight in World War II, and I served as a destroyer, and I was partially involved in taking down German ships, and I was also a commander on one of the ships during a doomsday investigation on Vimy Ridge. So, William, tell me about your inspiration to write a book like this, and just why you wrote it and how you felt writing it. Okay, so my inspiration to write the book Lord of the Flies was basically, as I said before, I was a naval officer in the army during the World War II, and I just wanted to share my experiences, and my inspiration to write this book, well, it was simply what seemed sensible, because after the war, everyone was thanking God that they weren't Nazis. I'd seen enough to realize that every single one of us could be Nazis as well. So that's why I decided to write this book, to show how everyone has a little bit of evil in them and everybody has the power to be evil. And as you go on later on in the book, you'll see how this really develops in the book, and it really shows with the plot line and the characters. So William, tell me, was it a struggle getting this book published, and how long did it take? Getting this book published was definitely a big struggle because, it kept on getting rejected many times, but thanks to my publisher, Forbes for publishing my book, I'm very grateful. Even first when I sent it to them, they didn't want to publish it either. And just because due to the new head they had over at the Forbes publishing company, they allowed me to publish my book. So I'm very grateful to that man and their great company. Can you please explain the plot of the book and how it develops and some major events in the book and how that influences the story and the reader's perspective on the book? So the plot of events, first it starts, and this will also include the major events to answer both of your questions. It starts with first the boys land on the island as they're escaping an atom bomb that's been set off because there's a war happening. And then throughout, as they're flying, their plane crashes and it sets a giant scar in the island. And then basically the two boys that are in the beginning of the book are Piggy and Ralph, and basically they go to a pond and they find a conch, and a conch is a type of shell that Ralph didn't know about, but Piggy knew about, also representing his intellect. And Piggy basically tells Ralph to blow the conch, and then all the boys will hear it and they will come and gather together to form an assembly. So he blows the conch and some boys come. He blows it again and keeps on blowing it until everyone on the island is there. And one of those boys is Jack Merridew and his tribe. And Jack is as we already established, the leader of his boys. And he was also a prefect and a head boy and the leader of his choir. So Ralph quickly establishes that they need a leader on the island, and the boys have a vote to see who should be the leader of the island, and Ralph wins. So Ralph is now the leader. So then he goes and he says that they need to basically they need to set aside a group for hunting and a group for building shelters and a group in charge of a signal fire. And the signal fire was to make sure that the people who were the boats that were coming could see that there was somebody on the island and they needed rescue. So another major event is that like the boys go hunting and Jack tries to kill a pig, but he can't kill it because he's scared and he's still humane. So more go on, and another major event is later on in the chapter, or later on in the book actually. Ralph calls a meeting, and in that meeting he basically says how the boys haven't been doing anything, and they've been in all these meetings, but they haven't. Stop laughing. So they have had all these meetings, but the boys aren't following up with their promises, and they're just playing around and fooling around. And then they basically, this is the first fight that Jack and Ralph have, and they fight it out, but they still stay together. But we can slowly see that a rift is forming between the boys. And another major event is when Simon, we find out that he goes and hides in the forest and stays in the forest to relax and to get away from all the things that are going on. Another major event that happens in this during this meeting is the boys bring out the possibility of a beast living on the island. Some people say the beast is from the ocean, and some people say the beast could be from the air and stuff like that. And also another major event is when the boys start the fire with Piggy's glasses. The fire gets out of control and it burns one of the boys, killing him alive. And this really shows the descent into savagery, how nobody even noticed that the boy was burning, and how like they were just focused on the fire. And then so in the next chapter, the next main thing that happens is during the night, as Sam and Eric are watching the fire, a pilot wearing a parachute falls from the sky because his plane was shot down. And Sam and Eric see this and they think it's the beast. So they go and wake up Ralph and they tell him that, the beast is coming from the air and we saw it, and they give evidence of claw marks on Sam and Eric's arm, and they show like it's the beast from the air. And so that's another major event. And then the biggest climax, you could say, of this story is what happens next. And what happens next is a rift forms between Jack and Ralph. And basically Jack says, like, I'm not playing with you guys anymore, I've had enough of this. And he takes his tribe and they go out to the forest and they go hunt. And before the night falls, some boys are still left with Ralph. So there's still Sam and Eric, Ralph, Maurice, Bill, Roger, and Piggy, and some little ones. But as the night falls, Bill, Maurice, and Roger also go and join Jack's tribe. And Jack's tribe is hunting, and then they decide to leave a gift for the beast, which is basically a pig's head on a stick. And a dead pig head obviously attracts flies, and that's the Lord of the Flies. So as we established before, Simon likes to go into the forest and relax to get away from the stress of being on the island. And when he's there, he starts hallucinating, and he sees the Lord of the Flies, and he sees how it's like talking to him, and it's like speaking to him, and it tells him like, fancy me being the beast, fancy being the beast being something you can't hunt or kill. And basically Simon realizes this, that he wakes up from his hallucination and he realizes that the beast isn't something that's physical, but it's rather something that's within us all. and he goes up to the mountain where they're having a party, and Ralph and Piggy are also there, and then a sudden turn of weather occurs, and there's like lightning jolt and thunder, and then the boys start doing their chant and dance, and to make the thunder and lightning go away, and then they see Simon approaching, and I think he's the beast, so they start ripping and pinching and kicking and spitting and punching and Simon, and that eventually leads to his death because they push him off the cliff, and then they think he was the beast, but they didn't know it was Simon. And this shows the absolute savagery, and there's no turning back now. The boys have completely descended into savagery now. And then the last major event that occurs is the death of Piggy. And basically what happens is Piggy and Ralph want to go and reason with Jack because they took Sam and Eric hostage and they were beating them. So they go up there and reason with him, and basically what happens is Roger is standing on top of the Castle Rock, and then Castle Rock is the Jack's tribe's fort, and he takes a big boulder and he pushes it down the cliff, and it falls and it hits the conch and it hits Piggy, and Piggy falls down the cliff and he hits the sea rocks and breaks his head, and his body is carried out to sea. And the conch was broken into thousands and hundreds of thousands of pieces, which shows the absolute loss of civilization, because the conch was the symbol of civilization, and since that's not there anymore, it's completely gone. Civilization is completely gone. And the last major event is basically the boy Jack's tribe is trying to kill Ralph because they don't want him and they want absolute power. And Ralph wants to lead over the boys, and the only way to get that is to kill Ralph. So Ralph hears about this and he goes to hide in a forest. And the boys Jack's tribe sets the forest on fire to try and burn or smoke him out. And then this next part is very ironic because the fire that they set to kill Ralph was what led the naval officer to come and to rescue the boys. So it's really ironic because this fire was set to kill, but it's really what saved them. And then that's basically the major events. The one small event is where the naval officer comes and rescues the boys, and asks them, "What have you guys been doing? Was there a war or something?" Which is also pretty ironic because they're trying to escape from the war. But and that's the resolution of the book, when the naval officer comes and he rescues the boys, and they talk about what happened, and they were crying about like what they did and stuff. So William, tell me about the setting in your book. Like where is it, and how it helps develop the story. This story is set on an island, on a deserted island, where like it's very scary and dark and unusual and creepy. And this influences the reader and the story as a whole because it makes the reader, like feel like they're on the island with the boys. Like they feel like they are with Jack and they are with Ralph and they're hunting in the wild. And it really plays with the senses, and it gives a good sense of imagery to the reader. And it also influences the story because it provides the element of fear and the theme of fear into the story, because it shows how the boys are scared when it's dark and they're scared of what's unknown, and the island is a huge unknown for the boys and they don't know what's going on, so they're very scared of it. So in summary, it helps provide imagery for the boys and imagery for the reader because it makes you feel like you're in the story, and it also helps with providing the fear factor of the book and the theme of fear and the element of fear. After writing and publishing this book, William, what do you think, or who do you think rather, is the most important character in the book, and who do you think is your favorite character in the book? In my opinion, I think Piggy is the most important character in the book because he really is like the only sense of intellect and civilization left on the island after before when they land on the island and after the death of Simon. He's really the only one who has intellect and is still has some humanity and hasn't gone completely savage. And some people like to argue that Ralph is the most important because he also has intellect and humanity. But I'd like to remind the readers at home that, even Ralph once lost his humanity when he was out killing the boar with other hunters, and he killed it and he was very happy. So Piggy is the most important character in the book, in my opinion, because he's like Ralph's intellectual advisor, and he provides his knowledge and intellect, and he's the only one left with humanity amongst the boys. Personally, my favorite character in the book is Simon, because he's very innocent and he's very humane, and he's always rational in his thinking, and he represents most of us, like most of me inside me, because he gets stressed out a lot, and I think lots of readers at home can connect with Simon as well, because they have similar experiences where they get really stressed out and they just need a break from it all. And so my favorite character is Simon, and I think he's I like him very much because he's very innocent, and he represents us as a society, and he's like always rational in his thinking, and I think like many people aspire to be like Simon as well. So, what was the main theme you were looking to get out when you wrote this book? And who does it apply to most? And what was the target audience for this book? I think the main theme that I wanted to get across was the fight between savagery and civilization, because the boy's descent into savagery represents something that could happen to anyone in our society, because like when you're given the freedom to do whatever you want and you have no over control and you have no regulation and no laws in society, that means you can become fully savage like the boys, and that's what happened. And the fight between civilization and savagery is like the boys went so savage that they were killing the people who were civilized. Like both Simon and Piggy both died because of their civilization and their lack of wanting to be savage. So I think the main theme is like the fight between savagery and civilization, and the targeted audience, I targeted to anyone who was willing to read it. At that point, after it had been like declined by so many publishers, I just wanted somebody to read it. But the main targeted audience is in grade 9 students, like because the students, the characters in the book are around that age, the big ones, and the little ones are a bit smaller, like grade 5, grade 6. But yeah, that's the targeted audience because they're similar in age. So, can you go into detail about the conflict and resolution of the book? And please go into lots of detail so the viewers at home understand thoroughly what this book is about. The biggest conflict is between Ralph and Jack, and this is an external conflict between the ideas of civilization and savagery. And it's a conflict between the two characters, Ralph and Jack. Ralph represents civilization, while Jack represents a complete opposite, which is savagery. And the resolution to this conflict is when the officer comes just in time before savagery completely takes over and they kill Ralph, And, it seems like savagery won when they almost killed Ralph, but in the end, when the officer came, really who won was civilization, because the officer came just in time to rescue the boys and bring them back to civilization before they all ruined their lives and hurt somebody. Another conflict was Piggy fitting into the tribe. Now this can be considered either an external conflict or an internal conflict. It can be considered internal because it could be a conflict within Piggy's mind, knowing that he would never fit into Jack's savage ideas of hunting and savagery. but it could have been also an external conflict. It's pretty obvious who loses this fight because we all know what happens to Piggy. Roger releases the rock that eventually kills Piggy, and Piggy's lost the fight between him, his external conflict with Jack and Jack's tribe. So yeah, that's the second conflict. The last main conflict that's present in the book is Simon's conflict with himself. He represents morals and values and realizes in the book that the beast doesn't actually exist, but it's what exists inside of him and exists within everyone else, and is the beast is the potential for evil that exists in every human being, and it's not really a physical beast or a threat in the forest. This conflict seems to be internal, or well, perhaps like Piggy's, it's against all of the boys of Jack's tribe. None of them really seem to understand what Simon is trying to say, and they don't even listen to him when he comes up the mountain to prove that his point is correct. And the resolution to this was also bad because we all know also what happened to Simon. He was butchered and tortured and bit and kicked and spit by Jack's tribe, and he eventually died. Thank you for your time, Mr. William Golding. Now, before we go, can we get a loud applause for Mr. Golding? For everybody attending in the audience today, we have a special book. If you guys look under your seats, you guys all have a copy of the new William Golding book, Lord of the Flies. You get a Lord of the Flies. You get a Lord of the Flies. Everyone gets a Lord of the Flies. Thank you for attending today, and I hope you enjoyed the show. One last applause for Mr. William Golding.
Woo! 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 Great job!
Stop.